Greg, 15 seconds.
My name is Councillor Miles Ponder and I'd like to welcome members of the public, colleagues and officers to this meeting. I'm chairing tonight's meeting, and to manage a business as efficiently as possible, I'll invite people to speak one at a time to ensure their contributions are properly heard. Therefore, please do not speak unless invited to do so by me. Thank you in advance for your assistance. I'm not going to go through the fire evacuation procedure because I think we all know, and there's no guests here. So we'll go straight to agenda item 1, which is membership. Councillor Paul Hodgson-Jones is substituting this evening for Councillor Quilty. Agenda item 2 is communications and apologies. Apologies for absence has been received by Councillor Butler and, of course, Councillor Quilty. I'd like to welcome Barry Ellis, the Regional Manager for Inspire All, who'll be presenting item 5, Hilary Shade, and that's it. Yes. Oh, and Councillor Myers, of course, and Councillor Giorgio. So thank you very much for attending this evening. So agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? No? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the minutes. So the minutes of the 23rd of July 2025 approved as a correct record. Thank you very much. So then we'll go straight to agenda item 5, which is the Leisure Services Contract Progress Update, and it's presented by Barry Ellis and Hilary Shade as well, so thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you ever so much for the invitation again to give an update on where we are with the Leisure Services Contract. I think I recognise everybody in here, and I know you've got a tight agenda, but I will just run through a couple of slides just outlining what we do and we don't do as an organisation. Just to introduce myself, as you've said, I'm Barry Ellis, I'm the Regional Manager for Inspire All. I've worked in the leisure contract for over 30 years, and I have a team of managers who work across all our facilities in the area. Obviously work closely with the Borough Council, particularly Hilary and her team, to ensure that we're meeting the Council's objectives. My job is managing all the operational aspects and financial performance of the contract, and I look after a few other contracts in the general area, Central Beds, 96 Shenley Road, which isn't part of the Borough Council's portfolio, but it's very local and well used by the Borough Council, and Star Jumps Nursery, which is based at the Beck, which again is in Boreham Wood, inside Hertsmere, but isn't part of the contract as a whole. One thing I always like to bring up is I'm more than happy if people do have residents or councillors or anyone has any questions, ideas or comments. I've put my email on the presentation, so when it's shared, feel free to send any questions through to me or concerns that you have. I find it's much easier sometimes just to get them answered quickly rather than bounce around for a period of time before the answer's there. Just to give a real brief overview for Inspire All, obviously we used to be known as Hertsmere Leisure, so you may see in older presentations or other documents Hertsmere Leisure. We've changed our name, still the same organisation. We're a registered charity. I've put our charity number on there. We have a board of volunteer trustees. Our head office is now based at the Willett Centre, so we're locally based. And as I mentioned, we operate in Hertsmere and central Bedfordshire, across all sorts of leisure, sports, arts, community and childcare facilities. And one thing we do as a charity is when we make surpluses or when we're taking income off our customers, we're investing those back into the services and facilities. We have no owners or shareholders or anyone else that takes any profit from the organisation. Again, just to recap, so we have a management contract with Hertsmere Borough Council. It started in 2012. It was originally a 10-year contract, and then we've extended twice, once after we got a loan from the council to make some significant investments, and then also through the COVID period to help with the recovery. So the contract itself runs to 31st of January 2032. In that agreement, we took on full repair and maintenance responsibilities for the council, so we look after all the ongoing reactive, PPM maintenance, health and safety, everything else that falls within sort of operating the facilities. I was just working out, over the period of time since 2012, we've invested more than £15 million of capital projects. So some of that is big developments like the spas and the climbing walls and things we put in. Other things is just replacing roofs, replacing boilers. We've made significant investment over the period of time into the council's assets to keep them modern and operational. We pay a fixed rental to the council, and how the contract works, we have contract monitoring, so I provide monthly reports to Hilary and her team at the council. We have the leisure members panel where we present some more detailed information on some of the things we're working on, and we have quarterly client meetings, which is myself, Hilary and some of her team, and the council's consultant supports with that as well. That's all around aligning our objectives with the council's strategies and priorities. So obviously we have our vision for what we want to do, but as a local charity, we want to make sure we match that to what the council want to achieve from the facilities. I think we all know the facilities in Hertsmere, but just to run through what we are responsible for. So we have the Venue Leisure Centre, Three Ways Community Centre in Boreham Wood, Fursfield Leisure Centre, Star Jumps Nursery in Potters Bar, which is inside the Fursfield Centre, Williott's Theatre, Bushy Grove Leisure Centre, the Bushy Centre, the community centre in Bushy by Bushy Golf and Country Club. We also operate the park events that you probably see, so we put on activities within the parks. The Generation Plus, which used to be called 50 Plus, so we have 48 classes a week going on of different activities. And we also operate 3 healthy hub locations for Hertsmere. Just covering off some of the statistics that have come through from change from last year to this year. We're still seeing our sales recover very strongly from the COVID period. Last year was our most successful year that we've had so far. Some of the raw numbers on that is we've got 8,271 full members, so they're people that are paying by direct debit or paying annually and getting their free use when they come along. There's a few different types of memberships within that, but the key to that is we're only just about 3% down now on when we were in March 2020. So after COVID, we're about 60% down. Every year we've been chipping away, getting back to where our membership was. The rate of that recovery has slowed, but it hasn't stopped. When I reported to this meeting last year, we was at 8,005 members, so we've continued to grow through that period of time. One of the things that we found, I think I've repeated previously, but before COVID we had quite a lot of what we call sleeper members, where they would pay their membership fee but not actually come into the leisure facilities. So through that COVID period, obviously those people cancelled, which is why we're still down on members, but we're busier with footfall. The other note I'd had with our membership is our yield has improved, so that's the amount we get on average per membership. And that's because we've done a lot of work on realigning prices. Obviously, when people have left on old price structures, we've signed new people up on new price structures. So although we're a little bit down on membership, we're taking more money and having better footfall than we've had previously. Once again, I'm reporting that children's swimming lessons are one of the strongest growth areas that we've had. We now have, just on the swimming lesson programme alone, so excluding school swimming and other forms of club swimming, we have 4,687 pupils on our group lessons. That's up a massive 934 on where we was in March 2020. So that's one area that I keep seeing grow and grow. It has its challenges. We have to fit those children into our lesson programme. But that's been really positive, that extra engagement with young people in a very important life skill. One of the key investments we made just before COVID was in our spa and thermal areas, thermal spas. That's particularly at Bushy Grove and Fursfield. where we're really happy to be reporting that we've got 1,737 members in total at those two facilities. And when they were built for an absolute capacity of 1,400. So we've stretched well beyond what we thought was even possible with the space that we have. That leads to some of our problems, which is high footfall and lots of use of areas. Obviously has impact on things like cleanliness, damage, just it being busy in certain areas. So that's one thing we do battle with, trying to make sure that we spread the usage as much as we can so that it's not all at peak times. We encourage people to come at quieter times, those sorts of things. Again, I'm reporting that we do spa treatment services, so massage, holistic therapies, all sorts of other spa treatment therapies. That continues to grow, and that's been a real strong area for us since we invested pre-COVID in these nice spa areas at the venue and Fursfield. Last year, when I came to this meeting, we just opened the sauna and steam at the venue. So we didn't have space at the venue to put in a full spa like at Fursfield or Bushy Grove, but we upgraded through our own investment the sauna and steam area. And we have an amazing 1,091 members now at the venue who are taking on that additional use of the sauna and steam room there. So I think one of the things I'm really keen to demonstrate is that where we've invested money in additional facilities, we've seen really good return, both in footfall, diversifying the facilities that we have, and just really trying to stay modern with what the council's facilities operate. One of the things that we measure closely, as you'd expect, is customer satisfaction. I've put in here, we do what's called Net Promoter Scores, where we survey our members after they visit. So we take a certain percentage of people who visit on a 3-monthly cycle, and they score us from 1 to 10. It's a well-known international measurement, the Net Promoter Score. You subtract the detractors from the positives, and it gives you a percentage score. Fursfield have really been leading the way. They're at 36% positive. The venue is at plus 21%, and Bushy Grove at plus 18%. Pre-COVID, I was reporting quite often that the venue in particular was on a negative score, because you can have a negative score with these if you get more complaints than positive comments. So it's really good to see that that swell of customer satisfaction we've seen over the last few years has continued onwards. That's always challenged by the fact that when the facilities are busy, we have problems that come up, areas broken, misbehaviour, just generally being too busy for people to get into classes or sessions. A couple of things that have happened since the last year's meeting. Oh, I've got a spelling mistake on there. The UK Active National Awards, which is industry awards for leisure. Last year we were successful in being awarded the Leadership Team of the Year at the National Awards in Birmingham. That was for our swimming lesson programme and the leadership team within our swimming lessons. So it's really good to know that our swimming lessons were recognised and won compared to all the big operators across the country, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, as the leadership team. And we put a lot of work into that, looking at the development that the children get from their swimming lessons. So very much positive experience. And this year, Fursfield is through to be a finalist of the UK Active Centre of the Year, which is the most prestigious award that's available. That's in October, so we don't know yet whether we will be a winner, but we've gone through the mystery shopping and the customer surveys and all the other elements to actually get us to that point, which I think is a massive achievement, as in Fursfield's not a new leisure centre. It was built in the 60s, had bits added to it. It's not the most affluent area in the country. It's very much a public leisure centre with lots going on. So a massive achievement that Fursfield's through, just even to get through to be one of the finalists for that. One thing again that I was pleased to report, from last year to this year is that we've still seen an increase in participation. As I mentioned, memberships coming back up, swimming lessons are doing really strongly, but we see it across a lot of our portfolio of activities that the sites are busy and get busier. Last financial year, we achieved 1.551 million people, million visits, actually, yeah. And that was up even on last year when I was reporting. Very similarly, the growth had continued. So we're still seeing that pattern go on. We've actually had quite a difficult July and August. July was very hot, so we saw quite a dip in footfall. I'm talking about last year's figures here, but we are sometimes at risk of the elements taking away some of our activities. Things like soft play, people don't come to soft play if it's a lovely day outside. So through that very dry early summer period, we saw footfall drop down. But we've got the rain now, so we're raking it back in now that we've got some rain. Just again, it's not everything that we do, but the financial recovery has gone amazingly well with the contract after some very difficult years after COVID, and even before that, where we were investing money and had various parts of the buildings closed. So our turnover now for the contract's 11.5 million, and contract expenditure was 11.3 million. And that's the first surplus that we've been able to post since 2015, 2016. So it's the first year where our income has actually exceeded our expenditure. So that gives us some opportunity to invest more, to obviously to work towards different priorities moving forward. Just some of the other facilities, what's been going on. So Willets Theatre, for those who visit Willets, last year we refurbished the ladies' toilets, but left the men's toilets as they were because we could only afford to do one at a time, and there was a real marked difference in quality. This summer we've just refurbished the gents' toilets as well, so both now are looking really smart. Might sound quite a minor thing, but the toilets at Willets have always been an issue for us, because when we have a busy show on, we only have some very small toilet areas and people are queuing up for ages to get into them, which means they don't spend money at the bar or get a drink in the intervals of shows, and often people are late getting back in. So we've done a lot of redesigning in the space to get quicker turnaround. As always, we've got a really busy autumn and winter programme at Willets, and I'd encourage everybody to look at the Willets webpage. There's something on for everybody at Willets. Through the summer, we've had lots of kids shows, film, with busy film programme coming up, and then a real mix of live shows, music. We also do quite a lot of theatre rentals where schools or other groups hire the facility and put on their own productions, which is always a great addition to the programme that we manage. And just going back, the pantomime last year was the busiest we've ever had at Willets, and this year we've got Cinderella, which again is quite a strong title for a pantomime. So that starts on the 12th of December. So again, we're really hopeful. For theatre, particularly for Willets, we take a large proportion of our annual income just in that period of pantomime. We have 2, sometimes 3 shows a day, day after day after day. So a lot of hard work, and really Willets' success depends on that. I think everybody in here is aware we also operate the park events. So we had a full programme for 2025. Only 1 or 2 weather issues this year. So earlier in the year we did our Easter egg hunts, which are always popular around the three towns. We do Potters Bar, Bournemouth, Bushy. We continue to do the films in the park. I think one of those was affected at Bushy by the weather this year, but they're popular, so we have a daytime and an evening film on. So they're always really nice to see. We have the fun fair there, or the small fun fair there at the same time. We do the fun in the park activities where a lot of partners come and join with us, the Borough Council, the police, fire brigade. Again, we have the small fair going on, the rides. And we've had over 7,000 attendances in the year to date with that. So a busy set of activities, obviously getting people into the council's park areas. Just some of the other things that have been going on at the community centres and the nurseries, Generation Plus and sports development. As I mentioned, we run 48 sessions per week on the Generation Plus programme. That's a mix of everything from keyboard lessons, art group, through to walking football, walking netball. So a real mix of older adults engagement, which is a real key area for keeping people active. One thing I'm particularly always proud of is our exercise on referral, which is where we have people referred to us from GPs, from hospitals, physios, and also a lot of work we're doing with Mind at the moment to get people referred to us. And we're now up to 299 physical activity members in the last 12 months. What we offer is a discounted 12-month membership for people which they can join if they're referred to us. People don't have to take that out. They can access us very cheaply otherwise. But that's our real measure, because we find once people have committed to a 12-month programme, they tend to see that through, and that's when you start to see health improvements come along. I was talking to our exercise on referral specialist Friday, and he was telling me about a lady that we had in who was a cancer survivor. She had never been on a treadmill before. She started on a treadmill. With our support, she ended up running the Manchester Marathon. So we took her from hardly being, able to walk and run, and then she competed in, or took part in the Manchester. I think it's a half marathon, if I'm honest, but still a great achievement. And we see those quite often in the pen portraits that we get of the difference it makes to people's lives. And we take people on with that, with quite a lot of physical and neurological conditions. So like I said, we've been working with Mind a lot more, and working really well with the doctor surgeries, getting people referred into us. We also have some physios that are based at our facilities which work with the NHS. We have a nice link with those for referring people on once they're through their first phase of recovery. The health hubs at Bushy Grove, Williots and 96 Shenley Road have been busy. We've obviously extended for another 2 years of that programme, part of the way into that year now. We see some of the things that we're delivering there have changed over time. The way we report some of the activities that we do with the health hubs have developed. But I think they're a real asset in the community, that people can come in and pick up advice from our specialist, Lee, who has a wide range of interventions that he can support people with, that takes the pressure off primary care providers, so people don't end up going to the doctor, or they can be quickly referred to him. We can get them doing health walks or smoking cessation or general things that will improve their health before it deteriorates further. The Get Active specialist, Lee, the person I talked about, has been working closely with the doctor's surgeries, and he's at the Grove. And we also offer things like the Aspiring Athletes programme. So these are primarily young people. We do have one or two who are over 25, but where they're on a pathway to sporting excellence, we can support with a free membership for them, so they can train with us free of charge as they develop in their careers. I've whistled through that very quickly, just as an overview of what was the updates I had. But
no, thank you very much. That was really informative, actually. So does anyone have any questions? I can see Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I suspect you won't know the answer to my question now, but it would be helpful if you could send the information in and it can be circulated to us. I'm interested that your increased membership numbers look encouraging. It would be helpful to understand how those numbers are spread across the borough, so as we know what they were, what they are, because whether there are particular either issues that encourage your membership, and in some where I don't know whether some of them have reduced, but you've compensated by increasing elsewhere. So it would be helpful to know that in due course. I don't expect you to know the answer now. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I can give an overview. I do have the exact numbers, but I'll obviously send them to you separately. So where we've seen the most growth is at the venue in Boreham Wood. So that's actually about 11% up on where it was pre-COVID. However, we did make some investment at the venue with a new gym, which helps boost those figures. Otherwise, Bushy is our busiest centre for memberships. Firsfield a little bit behind, and then the venue a little bit behind that. But it's pretty much an even spread between the three facilities. One thing from your question, though, that would be interesting is looking at where our members are in the borough to see if there's areas where we have high membership or any areas where people aren't coming to us. So I can certainly give you the answer to your question, but perhaps I can find some more information that tells us where the customers come from as much as which leisure centre they're going in, if that's helpful.
Councillor Kazar.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, quite similar to what Councillor Morris was asking. Looking at the range of venues that you operate, I'm just curious if you have any data on the kind of usage of facilities, especially the less popular ones, because we know obviously venue and first field and so on, they're the more popular venues. What about the least popular ones? For example, just the day before yesterday on Sunday, me and the ward councillors were out and about on Sunday, and we were near the Three Ways Community Centre, and for Sunday it was absolutely deserted. So I was just curious if you have any data on the underused facilities and the usage of that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, we have quite disparate facilities across the borough. So our busiest facility is Firsfield, where footfall's about 45,000 activities per month. We then have Bushy Grove, which is about 40,000. The venue doesn't have sports facilities alongside it, like football pitches or squash courts or a sports hall, and that's normally about 25 to 30,000 footfall per month. But then you're exactly right, we've got some smaller community facilities, particularly the Bushy Centre in Bushy and the Three Ways in Boreham Wood. So they operate more as traditional sort of community facilities where there's hirers that come in. I think on Sundays at Three Ways we do children's parties in the afternoon, and there is the social club that are based there. I think they open at 12 o'clock on a Sunday. I think we have a dance school on Sunday mornings. I'd have to double check. I do know they're in on a Saturday morning. I think they come in on a Sunday as well. However, we're just coming out of I imagine we're out of the school holiday period now, so I'd have to check when they come back. So Three Ways in particular, we do have, one thing we do have at Three Ways, which is really good, is we have a nursery base there. So they use the facility morning through till about 5 o'clock in the evening every day of the week. It's not a nursery that we run, but they hire the facility of us. And then in the evenings, we have various hires. We have Ishinru Jiu-Jitsu, who have been a club in Boreham Wood since 1992, I think they were founded. So they have a number of sessions with us in the evening. We have some dancing groups, like I mentioned. And then we have the social club who are based there the rest of the time. I'm happy to, as part of our client reporting, I provide monthly how many footfall there is for each facility. I'm happy to share that detail with you. But yeah, of course, there's always scope for us to fill more spaces in the hire. Similarly at the Bushy Centre as well. So thank you for your feedback and your question. I'll share some figures.
Councillor Bright.
Thank you very much indeed. First time I get to ask a question as a member of a scrutiny committee in my entire 20-something years, because I've never been on a scrutiny committee before. But I have, of course, was around when the original charitable trust was set up around about the year 2000. I'm looking at Hilary. And, of course, was leader when it became Inspire All in 2012. There is no doubt that there have been some incredible highs and some incredible lows. And what's really rather good to hear tonight, and by reading the presentation, is just to see how you guys have managed to battle those difficulties, particularly COVID, when this council did have to step in and provide further funding to keep you all afloat. And it's just as well we did do. I mean, just look at the figures in relation to membership. And those must be quite difficult when you think of the competition that has moved into town in the last 15 years. And perhaps you might just tell us a bit about how you deal with competition such as that. We have to keep an eye, as you know, you said some of the issues around some of the facilities within the centres you have to keep an eye on. Still need to keep an eye on the downstairs toilet that's used by visitors at the front of the venue. Why? Because I was there last week. It's difficult. Some of it's looking old and a little bit, do you know what I mean? It's going to need a little bit more investment, I think, rather than just a quick tidy up. I go there and I use the physio. My 16-year-old son is now using the gym. And I do think that there's generally a really good vibe about the place now. You're seeing people of all ages using the gymnasium, which is fantastic, people using the cafeterias and so on as soft play and the pool. And I know that the other centres also, particularly up at Williott's, are also well used and well liked. And I think part of the community atmosphere, part of that community feeling is really, really important, especially when it comes to competition. And all I would say finally is if you have a look outside the venue, and I've been focusing a bit on the venue, it says opened by Councillor Mayor Audrey Atwood on the 28th of September 2000, which is next week or the week after, will be exactly 25 years. I know myself and Hilary, we were there for that. I'm still glad to see that it looks pretty damn good and fine in there. But as I've said, I think that it would be very useful if you could just explain the sorts of monies that you're going to need to spend to keep the facilities. And I don't just mean the replacement of the sort of the technology that you're using around the machines to keep people coming in, but also on the general bill, the sinking fund and so on, and how that's going, so that we can ensure that we have facilities, Bushy Grove, Williott's, the venue, and obviously the other centres you mentioned as well, how we can keep them as relevant as we can over the next few years. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you. Just a small anecdote. I was the person who pulled the cord to open the curtains.
You had hair in those days.
I had hair
so
in those days.
So that's why I didn't remember.
So yeah, absolutely. That's my claim to fame when I'm at the venue, is I pulled the cord. And I was actually surprised because it's engraved and you couldn't actually see there was anything there. So I thought I'd opened it and there was no writing. But when the lighting's right, you can see it. Thank you for your comments. Quite a few really relevant ones there. Obviously, keeping the facilities tidy, maintained is one of our biggest challenges, and very much we see our customer feedback when it is negative ranges from when things are dirty or not clean, through to those minor maintenance things, so taps not working or general wear and tear on the facilities. And then, of course, you've got the larger items that you've probably seen at the venue, for example. There's buckets and things where the roof leaks at times. There's more significant areas that need big investment for those. Certainly on average, we spend around £1 million per year on our capital programme. That's been an up and down over the years. That's aside from the £5 million investment that we put in with the council's loan to change facilities. So we spend around £1 million upgrading, replacing, keeping things working. But it is an ongoing challenge. The venue in Boreham Wood, as you rightly point out, opened in 2000. That was phase 2 of the build, as you remember well. So the swimming pool area was two years before that. And that has actually lasted longer than the old swimming pool that used to be in Boreham Wood. And we think the condition that was in when it closed. So although we remember it opening, it's not a new facility. Similarly, Bushy Grove, a few years newer. And Fursfield, of course, is a much older facility. And we see challenges, particularly at Fursfield. It's a big sprawling site, so it's very energy inefficient. Lots of areas to have problems in. Things have been added over time. So our general capital investment plan is around £1 million per year, just to stand still, plus our PPM schedules and the other things. We do need to think how we manage that over the remainder of the contract. Obviously, our desire is to be keeping the council's facilities in tip-top condition within the budgets that we can afford, so that your residents get the best service possible. I think the other part of the question that you asked about was about competition. I think it's very important that we maintain our own identity. That's something we're really keen on. We're not a private club, we're not a high-end facility, but we have a real strong point in the market. I think all your local residents will have engaged with the facilities to some extent, or the vast majority of them will do, whether that's going swimming, using the gym, doing kids swimming lessons, going to the theatre. I think we've got a good reputation within the community, so when people want to go swimming, they know where to go. Clearly, we don't match the prices of the cheaper private gyms, so the pure gym types, we cannot compete with them on price, so we have to do that on service and on different facilities that we have. So we have a lot of success around fitness classes. Swimming obviously is quite unique. There's not a lot of other pools that you can use in the borough. So that challenge is always there, but I think we've weathered every storm of whether it's, David Lloyd doing a big refurbishment at the upper end of the price spectrum, through to pure gyms opening in Boreham Wood and then in Watford and London Coney, so where we get squeezed at the lower end. But I think we keep our market very steady in the middle, so we obviously aspire to be able to deliver that David Lloyd experience, but in a facility that's well, at a price point that's affordable, and in a facility that's used by all members of the community. So you mentioned youth gym, things like that. You won't find that we take youths from 12 years old to do youth gym. You wouldn't find something like that at Pure Gym or anywhere else, but we think it's a really good, well, certainly not in the supervised sessions that we do, but we think it's a really good addition to what we do in the fitness facilities. You throw in the swim lessons, the school swimming, the club swimming, we've got a real niche market. Sorry, that's quite a rambling answer.
That's okay. If I could just come back very quickly, Mr. Chairman. One's a question and one's just a statement. The question is, now that there's been a change in the way that people pay for parking, so we're specifically talking in the venue car park, where historically you got your ticket and there was a little stub on it, so you paid your £1 for an hour, and then you go in and at the venue they gave you 50 pence back. I know it may sound like a small amount, but will you guys be benefiting from the fact that most people now will just be paying their £1.10 on a card, like I did last week, and I can't be bothered to work out how to get your 50p back? And also, it's just worth pointing out for those people who haven't been around as long as I have, that the cost to this authority of subsidising leisure back in the late 1990s, before we had these leisure centres and they came in as a charitable trust, was £750,000 a year, right? And that's 25 years ago, so you double that now, right? So that's a lot of money. In order to be able to do that, you'd have to raise council tax by a hell of a lot if we were running it in-house. So by running it as a charitable trust and putting it out there, that was a very wise decision. I think it was a unanimous decision at the time. And finally, for those people who are in Bushy, who are always worrying at the moment around the number of Greenbelt applications, Bushy Grove, as you'll remember, was Greenbelt land. And the council wanted to build a leisure centre on it, and local people said, we don't know if we want to have one. Well, local councillors, in fairness, said, but it's Greenbelt land. So we went out and did a referendum. I think it was 1 in 8 houses. It was all done properly. And the vast majority said, yes, give us a leisure centre, and look how wonderful Bushy Grove has been. So give a bit of people the power to make decisions, and hopefully they make the right ones. But it's, as I say, it's a moment to be very proud, I think, and so I'm very grateful for the work you've done. I know how long you've been involved, and all the people at Inspire, because it just feels like a kind of big family, really. So thank you.
Thank you for the feedback on those points. Regarding parking at the venue, lots of leisure centres now have pay to park at, so the venue isn't unique certainly in the London area. Obviously, Bushy and Fursfield, we manage the car park ourselves, and that's solely for those facilities, so we don't charge. There's no charge for parking there. We do save some money by not doing the refunds, 50p a visit, but obviously if you're a gym user coming 3 times a week in the daytime and you're paying £1.50 a time, it adds to your cost of coming and using the facility. So the saving we make probably isn't doesn't cover the people that may consider going to a different facility. However, talk about our competition, you know, although you can park at the boulevard, I think for 3 hours, it does get very busy down there. So if you're going to Fitness First, you have to worry about your parking down there. Other facilities don't have free parking always. So I think it's been the case for quite a long time. So it does probably have an effect on the venue. But it'd be difficult to measure that because it's been CPZ for a very, very long time.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert, you had a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry. That was it was very good. It sounds as if you're getting back to pre-COVID standards and providing a good service. It was when I saw that you were making a surplus for the first time since 15-16 that I just want to probe that a little bit, because that's, I think, around about the time that we advanced £5 million, and then there was the COVID holiday, and I just wonder where the situation is in relation to that £5 million, and are you able to service that loan, or is it almost paid off? And Matthew is behind you if you need him.
Thank you for that. So just running through chronologically a little bit of it. So yes, 15-16 we made a surplus. The year after that we had some difficulties with Bushy Country Club that pulled our reported our surplus down. Bushy Country Club obviously closed. We then borrowed the £5 million, I think it's 2018, we started making the investments. So we obviously spent a lot of that period with reduced facilities, so parts of the building were closed. We posted a manageable loss in those years. Clearly, once we was hit by COVID, we reported very significant losses over that COVID period, and then we've seen that growth back in. So the £5 million investment was really key to our recovery from COVID, because that was the additional facilities that we were going to benefit from just before we had to close in that time. With regards to the repaying the £5 million, so yes, there's a schedule of that I think ends in 2029? 2030. So, and although that's been moved back during COVID, we're still repaying the whole lot as we'd expect to do. That's why we had a 5-year extension on the contract to move that repayment forward. So we're making those repayments, servicing the debt, paying the interest as we go along. So that'll be paid off approximately a year before the end of the contract, which is a year and a bit before 2032. Does that answer? Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see any further hands for any other questions. So in that case, yeah, thank you very much for your reports. Very much appreciated. And is everyone happy to note the update? Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Well, now move on to agenda item 6, which is the complaint handling report for 2024-2025, which is going to be presented by Alex Moore from Democratic Services.
Thank you, Chair. This committee receives the annual complaints report at around this time each year, and it summarises complaints received and their progress through our system during the previous year. This report therefore covers the year of 2024 to 25. Hertsmere Borough Council's current complaints system has been in place since April 2022. Paragraph 3.1 outlines the kind of information it captures about cases. From then until the end of 2025, that's the year this report covers, the Council operated a 3-stage complaints process. Paragraph 3.3 outlines how this worked and the timescales it operated under. On the 1st of April this year, the Council switched to from a 3-stage model to a 2-stage model. This change was discussed at policy review in December and then approved by Cabinet in February this year. The rationale for the change was that while there are now fewer stages, the individual stages are longer, allowing for more thorough, perhaps less rushed investigations. However, the time span for the overall process would reduce, allowing faster resolution for residents and ensuring lessons could be learned by council staff sooner. This will therefore be the last report summarising complaints data from a 3-stage year. Residents' right to complain to the local government and social care ombudsman is unaffected by the change in the structure. The LGSCO, or LGO as it's sometimes still known, only accepts complaints once they have completed the complaints process at the individual council, and that's whatever structure it operates. From there, it only investigates if its preliminary assessment finds that there's a prima facie case that there was a fault. In 2024-25, and the data about the Ombudsman reports is in Appendix B to the report. In 2024-25, 12 complaints were made about Hertsmere to the Ombudsman. 10 of those were closed after initial inquiries, and of the 2 that were investigated, neither was upheld. We were the only borough in Hertfordshire to have had no upheld complaints that year. So sections 4, 5 and 6 of your report and Appendix B provide and analyse data from the Council's corporate complaint system in 2024-5, and section 7 and Appendix B look at the Ombudsman cases. I and Mr Kershaw are happy to answer any further questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Is anyone, Councillor Hodgson-Jones, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. I was a little bit intrigued by the table 4.1. The increase in complaints is quite considerable, really, and it seems to have a pattern, and it seems to have risen inexorably since 2023, when there was a change of control in the authority, and I wondered if there was any linkage between the two, particularly since the increase in the complaints to waste services. How many of those relate to the introduction of fee charging for green bins, and rumours around that of the new food waste service, which hasn't yet hit these figures. So I'm just interested as to what the explanation is, and what the view of the council is on the increase in complaints, and whether there is any possibility of tackling those complaints.
So I'll take it, because I think it's mainly directed at is there a linkage between the increase and waste services in particular. The first thing to say is this is a trend which is not unique to Hertsmere. So the complaints generally for local authorities have been increasing year on year, and it's not a trend which could be really linked to administrations either. It's just generally this is the pattern of complaints across local authorities across England and Wales, and the kind of general understanding of that is really more about accessibility of the complaints procedure. More people are online and submit complaints online, and it's generally much easier to make that kind of contact. In terms of our local processes, probably the significant change that we made is how we accept complaints, using automated processes through our customer services, through our website, and that's really where we see those kind of increases in. And as I say, they are in line with national trends. I think it's relevant to say that whenever a council communicates with residents more intensively, it tends to receive more comments, and that will include more complaints. Every year we will see the profile of our complaints. The month where we get more complaints than any other is the month where we issue the council tax bill. So it's more a link with communications and changes. And yes, when we change waste services,
a universal service, we will get more contacts and we will see an increase in complaints around that. The particular stats that you're looking at today obviously reflect last year up to April. I would be amazed when we look at the complaints for next year that we don't see, I would expect to see a spike around April for 25-26. And that would be something I would expect in any authority.
Councillor Cazal.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at Table 3 under 5.5, this is page 12. Two things jumped out to me, and I just wanted to ask you about that. First is standard of service 2022-23, it was 29 complaints, which has now increased 2024-25 to 45. And then the same thing, there's an increase of attitude or treatment by a member of staff. It was 10 in 2022-23, up to 20 in 2024-25. Is there a reason for the increase, and is there any correlation between standard of service and member of staff, and is this something that we can improve going forward?
I think when we're talking about where it says attitude of treatment by a member of staff, and I tend to see more of those complaints personally myself, what we are really seeing is a misunderstanding of the level of interaction that refuse crews can have with members of public. We do not encourage our crews to have lengthy conversations with members of public about the bins and the bin service. We want them to crack on with the round, and they just firstly don't have time to do that, and secondly, the public will get a better explanation by contacting our customer services, who are trained to have those conversations. So typically what we're seeing in those sorts of complaints is really an expression of dissatisfaction that they haven't been able to persuade the bin man to perhaps take a bin that they'd rejected because of contamination or other issue. That's it's a bit of a generalisation, but typically that's what those sorts of complaints are about.
So is that the same reason why failure to provide service has now come to the triple digits now in 2024-25? It's now 144 complaints.
Yes, so I would say again, this comes back to when you change something, then there is always going to be some level of resistance to a change. And no matter how effectively you communicate it, there will be some residents who are resistant to that particular change. And so what we will see is expressions of dissatisfaction in that regard. So whether it's standard of service, attitude of treatment, these are much more related to we providing the service in a different way than we used to.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. I think you might have answered this already. I mean, it's also about the number of complaints, and it is around refuse collection. I had assumed that these increases were pretty much all because of changes in refuse collection, timetables, taking a harder line on black bins, charging for green bins, and so on. Do you agree with that? And bearing in mind that this year is the first year that we are charging for green bins, how do you think there will still be more complaints this year rather than declining? They will still be going up because they're actually paying for a green bin service, and I know that there are quite a lot of levels of dissatisfaction about the green bin collection service.
We didn't see a tremendous amount of formal complaints about the garden waste collection, either this year or last year. It's a small number. Typically, what people are concerned about is whether or not their bin is collected. And we have had, over the last year, some issues around staffing and whether our rounds were completed on schedule. That's probably the biggest area where we might see residents contacting us. But in terms of garden waste, and I speak frequently to our customer contact centre, and they are effectively the frontline staff dealing with residents' concerns on those issues. The most typical comment we received was, well, we knew it was going to come in. We're surprised it hadn't been done already.
Councillor Bright was next.
Thank you very much indeed. You know, nothing I'm going to say or ask is personal. You know that. It's very important you understand that, because I know how hard our officers work, and I also know that it's the, I was going to use a rude word there, but it's the pooey end of the stick, having to pick up bins in all weathers when it's exceedingly cold and, like it has been this year, exceedingly hot. There's a couple of questions for you, Ian, as head of service. You talked a moment ago, you said it's all about how effectively you communicate the changes. Looking back at the way the changes have been made to our services in relation to green waste collections, including the stalled start last year when we had to revoke and say it's going to be next year, and then the garden waste collection, do you think we were as effective as we could have been in our communication? And something that troubled me for people with experience is, why did we start such a scheme in the spring months, in April, May, June, when everything starts to come to life again, where everything starts to grow, so green bins get the first cuts of the year, the green bins fill up quicker, the bins then start to get heavy. When we introduced the original green waste collection in 2006, we started in November. Why? Because you know it takes about 3 months to get a service right. It's fair enough. It does take a while to do it. And it always seemed to me to be very odd to start a brand new service like that and you're asking for trouble work. Because if you started it in November and you didn't pick up someone's green bin, there was not likely to be much in it. But in April, May time, there was. And I think we could have potentially saved ourselves being bitten in the bum by some of the complaints. We don't yet have the exact tonnage and the take-up rates. I know our people have been asking for them for council, and we're not getting the exact numbers. They're not being given to us at the moment. But it does look like recycling is down again, and that was after a 5 percentage points drop. So it dropped from 44% to 42% last year. And these are not my figures, they're on the government website. And it's already dropping back. And my concern is that I don't want us as an authority to try and turn something which currently is not a success into a story that it is a success. That we weren't offering this before, but this is what we're offering. Yeah, but out of the 39,000 people who had a green bin, we've only had a take-up of, I don't know, whatever it is, 60%. What's happening to the rest of it? So until we fully understand and we drill down into what's happening to the bins. So you said there were a lot less collections, green bin complaints. Well, of course there were, because people just weren't putting them out anymore. And those of you who are out on election knocking on doors in April, you would have seen that. They didn't get their pink slips. They thought, stuff it, I'm not paying for it. And they did, and they put it away. So I wouldn't expect there to be huge numbers of those, other than those who've paid and then weren't getting it collected. So I do think that we need to have a deep dive. We do need to look, preferably not into some of the bins, but we do need to have a deep dive, and we need to really understand where our service needs to lift. Not because of the number of complaints as such, but because if we want to continue to move forward with the service in the manner which it's now been done, the decisions have been taken, we have to proceed with it, then we want to make sure we're doing the very best we can for the environment by picking up as much as we can and encouraging people to use it. And finally, if you had your chance again, would you still have allowed the commissioning of or the use of diesel vehicles to pick up to pick up food waste? So it's going around 40,000 houses or however many have got them every week in a diesel van. And we're told on the one hand, let's do stuff for the environment, let's do stuff that's good, and we're using diesel vans. Would you do that in a different way again? And how do you see the future of collections moving away from fuel like diesel. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. There's quite a lot of points in there, probably a bit beyond the scope of the complaints report, but let me do my best to pick them up and address them. I think the first thing to say is the changes that we've made are the changes that we have to and need to make. So these are changes that ensure that we comply with the government regulations set out in the Environment Act, and it's not a really partly political thing because that was introduced by the previous government, continued by the current government. So that means that we need to make the changes to the waste system that we have done. I think in terms specifically of the garden waste, we always expected to get about a 60% take-up. That's what we've got. So I'm very pleased that we hit our predicted levels of take-up. One of the important things about waste is actually we don't really want to collect it because we'd rather people didn't produce it. So I think arguably it's a more efficient system now because we are collecting from those households that require a garden waste service, whereas previously we were providing a universal service across the borough. It's also a more equitable service because we're providing it to those who pay for it, whereas previously it was paid through the council tax. So if you lived in a fourth floor of a flat with no garden, you're still paying for the garden waste collection. So I think we've got a more equitable and a more efficient service through the garden waste collection, and it's achieving the tonnages that we expected with regard to that. Overall, just on recycling numbers, nationally, recycling's been pretty stagnant across the country for some time. That's why respective governments have introduced the legislation that they've had, which is aimed at lifting that recycling. We have seen in the last year a slight uplift in the recycling rate, and that's what our own local figures are projecting. We are spookily really close to English national average, and we still are. So that's where we are on the recycling. You mentioned the communications. I'm really proud, actually, of the communications campaign that we've run to introduce all of these waste changes. We worked incredibly hard, not just in the waste team, but also with our customer services team, with our communications team, with our digital team, to make sure that we're using every method that we can to put the changes across to residents, explain it in the most simple terms to them possible. So, we specifically 2 editions of Hertsmere News, the Christmas bin collection hook-on, food waste bin delivery to every household, which included leaflets and further communications within the food waste bin, specific door-to-door leaflet on top of all of those, and our customer contact team available. We put out messages on social media, as well as the kind of more standard press releases. So I think it's hard to think of a kind of range of media or styles of communication that we could have used that we didn't. Lastly, you asked about diesel vehicles. You're absolutely right. The new food waste vehicles that we've got are diesel. We are completely constrained by the depot that we run from. So our depot based in Potters Bar is incredibly tight for our operation. It has no fueling within that depot of any type. And we need to expand that and grow it. It's not really a Hertsmere specific problem. You'll probably find most waste depots up and down the country need modernisation and expansion. One, because more households is more waste, more dust carts. And 2, because we need to fuel our vehicles differently. So we need to have either and or both an electricity supply that can cope with charging electric vehicles, of the size of the fleet that we have. We need to have a bund for fuel so we can actually fuel stuff direct and have a bit of resilience around that. You will remember when we had the petrol shortage a few years ago, we were incredibly reliant on the goodwill and cooperation of Tesco's to fuel our dust carts, and that was a tense time for me. So it's actually the infrastructure at the depot which is based in Potters Bar, which it constrains how we fuel vehicles, and until we can improve that depot, I cannot put in electric or hydrogen or even recycled cooking oil fueled vehicles, which are all options. Yes, so we've been carrying out feasibility studies, and I will be bringing a report to Cabinet in November on the outcome of those feasibility studies. Yeah.
Councillor Morris, you had a question.
Yes, I'm going to go back to tables 1 and 2, and it's really trying to understand the various relationships between the significant growth, and I know you've said technology's improved, so more people are complaining. I'm not sure I can totally live with that, but I'll take it on face value. But from what I'm understanding through table 2 is the 565 complaints total in 2024-25, if I'm reading this correctly, has been reduced to 27 in table 2. And I'm just trying to understand what happened with all the rest. You know, am I understanding the report correctly? Am I misinterpreting the report? And I'm just trying to understand that where we've seen a very significant increase in complaints, but are we seeing residents that are happy with the result afterwards? And I'm not quite sure how we measure that.
In table 1, that records stage 1 informal complaints. So that's an indication of the number of complaints going in the front door of the system. And then table 2 just looks at 2024-25, and it's from that cohort of 565, how many of those then make it to a stage 2 response? So they're escalated by the customer, escalated by the resident, investigated and receive a stage 2 response, and then from there, those that are escalated again and receive a stage 3 response. So it's a pyramid. Base level is 565.
Yeah,
middle
so
level 80, and then 27.
I mean, and just to underline that's kind of the attrition that I would hope to see. So basically, what we're showing is that most complaints are resolved at stage 1. So that first contact when somebody says, I'm really unhappy about a service, and they get a response explaining what that is. We've got probably, if it's 565 at stage 1, 80 went on to stage 2. So 480 odd of those were happy with the stage 1 response, that they got the explanation or apology or whatever that they expected at that. There are then those that go on to stage 2, and we did have 27 who went on to the then stage 3. I think it's probably useful to give a bit of assurance about moving to this 2-stage process. Those that have gone on to stage 3 have then also generally gone on to the Ombudsman, because I think whatever we said at stage 2, we're still staying at stage 3. They're just not really agreeing with the council's particular line on that issue. It's generally a dispute over policy, and occasionally we'll have, every council has a number of vexatious complainants who are incredibly persistent, and no matter what is said at a particular stage, they will pursue to the nth degree. So we should see that attrition. a two-stage process actually means that customers who are not happy get their final definitive answer much more quickly and can move on to the Ombudsman if they so wish.
Which then brings in the classification out of this 565, which we've got down to 27. Are we able to understand how many of the total ended up going to the Ombudsman? Because they were unhappy, obviously, with what they felt they were getting from last year.
In 2024-25, there were 12 cases about Hertsmere Borough Council reported to the Ombudsman. So the fourth layer on this pyramid is 12 cases.
And I think it is important to add on to that then what the Ombudsman's findings were. And I think, Alex, in that for those 12, they were either not investigated by the Ombudsman or found to have no merit. So not investigated by the Ombudsman is effectively the Ombudsman saying, there isn't really even a complaint here. I'm not going to look at it at all. There are some which will receive an investigation, but in all 12, the council was not found to be at fault.
Thank you. I don't believe there's any further questions. Is the committee happy to note this report? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move to agenda item 7, which is the financial monitoring Q1 from April to June 2025. And this is going to be presented by Matthew Bunyan. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Chair. So as the Chair just said, this is the report as at Q1 for the financial year 25/6, and it reports on the overall financial monitoring position for the revenue budget, capital budget, treasury management and debt. So there's a brief sort of cover report, and then there's 4 detailed appendices A to D. So I will take you through the appendices. I'll take the report as read and just pick out some of the highlights. So in relation to the revenue, Appendix A, as at the end of Q1, we're showing a favourable variance of 529k and a forecast year-end variance of 1084k. And if I take you to the summary page, which is page 3 of the appendix, page 37 of the pack, it shows a breakdown by service and shows the variance against profile budget to date and the year-end forecast variance. So just picking out some of the more significant variances there. Asset management currently is showing an adverse variance of 155k, which is forecast to be around 390k by year end. The main reason for that is related to the studio's rent. As members will be aware, the rent was reduced to the minimum provision within the lease because stages 7, 8 and 9 were taken out of action for quite some time. Work is being undertaken on those to bring them back into use, and it's anticipated they should be back into use next month, which is good. I will be meeting with the studios to review their rent as part of the annual rent review process in October, and we will review that rent. So when we agreed those works, we agreed we'll put the rent back up to the full level of 1.7 million. So at the moment, the rent they're paying is sort of $500,000 a year below what we budgeted for, but that was noted in the budget that there was a risk there that might not be achieved. So it doesn't come as a surprise that we're not achieving it at this moment, and I think there will be a gap come year end, and I'll update further on that at the next meeting. There's also some pressures in there in relation to some feasibility works, which may well be recoverable in the future if those works end up becoming a capital project. And also there is some additional staff time in there, some agency time. Some is covering vacancies, but other agency staff there are also working on projects, and some of their time may be chargeable to those projects as well. So I would hope to see some movement in that forecast over the coming months, and obviously we'll pick that up in the next report. The next service I'd just like to highlight is housing, which is showing a favourable variance of 171k currently, although that falls off to just a small favourable variance by year end. And the reason that is showing like that at the moment is because we've received a significant amount of grant funding up front. So that grant funding is funding some staffing costs and some specific project costs. So you'll see on the detail page that there are some overspends on the salary costs, but then they're being picked up from that grant income. The next one I was just going to touch on was policy and partnerships, and again a favourable variance of about 90k, and for the same reason, that's due to grant income being received in advance, and obviously that's offsetting some of the costs that are showing there. If I move on to the corporate expenditure, so the most significant variance there is on senior management restructure, so that's a separate line we've put in there, and that was based on the approval that council gave in February. So that wasn't part of the budget report, it came after the budget report, and we said that we would fund it during the year from any surplus. And it's good to see that we have got a forecast surplus, and ultimately what I will intend to do now is for the next report I'll reflect the fact that that additional cost that was approved by council has now been funded by that surplus. So we won't continue to show it as a variance, we'll show it as a environment between the two. So investment interest was specifically mentioned in that cabinet, in that council report as one of the funding sources. That's all I wanted to say on Appendix A. Obviously there's a lot of detail there. If there's any questions, I'm happy to pause at that point before I move on to Appendix B.
Should we take questions on Appendix A first in that case? Councillor Bright.
Yes, as I'm going to ask a question about the studios, I'm going to declare another pecuniary interest as council-appointed director of the studios. However, because it's a landlord-related matter and dispensation is given, in fact, will be tomorrow as well at council, I'll ask to keep it about landlord-related matters. You'll recall just under 2 years, it was over 2 years ago, council was called together to make a decision about demolishing stages 7, 8 and 9. Which you just referred to in relation to drop in rental recently. At the time, the Labour Liberal administration voted in favour. I said, no, this is not a clever thing to do. It doesn't need to be done yet. Remediation work needs to be looked at further. My lot voted, obviously, against. 2 years later, 7, 8 and 9 has not been knocked down. 2 years later, 7, 8 and 9 have been remediated and are reopening to business. Hopefully we'll get more rental in as a consequence. As an officer who was obviously involved with sort of overseeing this at the time, who do you believe was right then?
What I would say is, based on the advice that we were receiving from the project managers and the contractors at the time, the demolition and rebuild project was the favourable option at the time, and that was one of the 4 or 5 options that was presented to council for a decision. So at the time, that was the option that was presented to members for approval, and that was approved. Obviously, subsequent to that, we've had different advice, which has now resulted in that project being taken out of the capital programme and the remediation, health and safety works now having been put in place and being undertaken.
So let me just continue on that, because it's obviously difficult to ask an officer to make what is effectively a call which sounds political. Let me take the politics out of it. As a professional person, I've known you many years. As a professional person, are you frustrated when officers advise and give council advice based on the advice you're receiving, when some members who are not as experienced are saying, we really don't think this should be done and give reasons. And then we find ourselves in a situation a couple of years after tens of thousands of pounds were spent on consultants' fees, only to discover that actually we should have waited. How is that, because I've never been an officer, I've been a political person, is that frustrating from an officer's point of view?
I'm not sure that entirely takes all of the political element out of that question. And I think that at the time I acted on the, or I didn't act alone, we acted as a group of officers and we advised the council based on advice that we had. That advice subsequently changed and we acted on that advice, and we now have stages that have been are being refurbished and brought back into use.
Final crack at it. Would you therefore agree that the advice to demolish those stages was wrong advice?
I'm not sure I can say that now. I think at the time it was the advice of professionals, and we accepted that advice. I'm not going to say it is wrong or right because I'm not a professional in that field and I can't advise. So.
Yeah, we'll now move on to Appendix B, I believe. So,
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so we're moving on to the capital. So again, I'll take it as read and just pull out a couple of highlights. So again, this is a position as at quarter one. So if you look at paragraph 2.5, we're showing a revised capital programme of 21.3 million. That includes the actual slippage as at the end of 24-25, which has now been added or brought forward from the previously approved programme and added into the current year. We've had one scheme that has been removed from the programme, which is in relation to this building and the roof replacement. And we've had some new schemes or additions to schemes that have been approved through Cabinet or Council. So we've got a total revised capital programme of 21.3. In terms of our actual performance against that, we're showing a forecast spend for the year of around 8.6 million and actually quite a large slippage of 12.6 million. The main reasons for the slippage are highlighted at 4.4, but you can see there's a couple of schemes, development projects there, where we're actually now reviewing those projects. So they're not currently progressing. There's one project, Catterick Way, that actually we have brought back to for some additional funding through 106 monies following the tender process, and that project will now be undertaken and will complete later than originally planned, so we'll now slip into 26/7. The works on 80 Shenley Road, there is a planning approval going in relation to those works, but ultimately all the agreements are now in place for those works and they will commence in the spring 26. And the Meadow Park Cafe and Kenilworth Park are also delayed but are due to be completed in 26. So quite a significant amount of slippage, and I think that we'll touch on that again when it comes to the Treasury report, because that has had a positive implication in terms of our investment return. I think the capital programme is set out in detail in Table 4 on a project-by-project basis, and it gives you a brief commentary on each scheme there. I think that's all I wanted to say on capital. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on Appendix B here? Councillor Hodgson-Jones?
Thank you. Matthew, I recall when we were first discussing the budget back in the start of the year, one of the questions I had at the time was why was there no planned capital expenditure for future years? So it was basically the existing budget plus slippages. And I'm looking at Table 1 and I see new schemes approved, but all of those new schemes look as though they are short-term schemes. Why is it that we don't have any long-term capital investment plans in place when schemes approved in previous years and we still show capital expenditure in 26, 27, 27, 28, but that is only out of existing approved budgets. Is there a reason why all of the schemes currently approved are basically short-term schemes, and questions why these are really capital budgets? I know they're capital items, but where is the long-term investment?
All right. Yes, you're correct. The new schemes that have been approved are either extensions to additional funding for existing capital programme schemes, or they're new schemes that have been brought forward and will be undertaken in a short time frame. There were no new capital bids brought forward as part of the annual budget process for 25-6. So there were no new schemes added in at that point. But as you'll be aware, the capital programme is a rolling programme, and capital bids can be brought forward and are brought forward throughout the year, and will be considered by Cabinet and Council and can be added to the capital programme. At the time of the 25-6 budget process, there weren't any bids that were ready to be brought forward at that time, but subsequently bids have been brought forward. And at the moment, some of the, as I've mentioned, some of that slippage will now move into future years and will be reprofiled. But we don't currently have anything in sort of beyond sort of, with the exception of disabled facilities grants, we don't have anything sort of moving forward beyond the sort of current programme at the moment.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I come back on that? So the point I made in March or February when we were discussing the budget was there was no planned capital investment. What is the investment strategy of the administration for improving things? Since then, we've had some minor items adjusted, but the only increase capital expenditure in 26-27 is slippage from existing projects, not major projects being undertaken. And yet asset management have spent a lot of money on restructuring and recruiting, and I hear lots of things happening about assets within the council. Why is there nothing appearing in the long-term capital budget? And I just wonder what's going on. Here talk about things being done to council assets, and yet there is no provision in the capital budget to deal with any of these things, and I'm just a little bit intrigued.
I mean, obviously there's a number of projects in there for asset management currently. I mean, they take up the majority of the capital programme, so there's a significant amount of investment going into our assets at the moment. Work on this building is sort of currently being undertaken. We've mentioned a few projects. A couple of those projects have now slipped back to next year. Catterick Way is now being brought forward this year. So there's a lot going on within that, but there will be new schemes coming forward. It's just at the moment, we've got quite a substantial capital programme which is being brought forward, and that future investment is something that's being looked at.
Councillor Kazar, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the kind of breakdown of all the various projects that's being undertaken and so on. I just wanted to specifically ask about the EV charging point installations because we've allocated quite a lot of money towards it. So can I ask how far into the installations are we in? How much has been spent? How much has yet to be spent? Because it says that the expenditure is expected in this financial year.
I'll answer that because it's my area. So we entered into a concession contract with Eon Drive after a competitive tender process. And whilst the council has allocated £250,000 of capital toward the installation of electric vehicle charge points, we are anticipating that the capital outlay for those charge points will actually be made by Eon Drive. So The partnership that we've entered into is that one whereby they will install the new charge points, carry out all the works for those charge points, and then they will operate them, and then we will derive an income share from those charge points because they are on our land. So we are hoping that we won't have to draw on that capital allocation. When it was initially made in the capital programme, the market for electric vehicle charge points was not so clear, but having gone through this tender process, that's the point we have arrived at. In terms of implementing it, members will have noticed quite a few of our car parks have areas fenced off and there's works going on. We are at the point of installing these charge points and that we will see a significant increase in them between now and Christmas. There's a few of the more complicated sites will be delivered in 2026, but that programme of work is well advanced, and I'm hopeful that I'll be able to say back to Matthew, actually, we no longer require that capital allocation because of the nature of the contract that we've entered into.
So can I just kind of ask, out of the 250k that's been allocated or approved, how much has been spent, and in terms of installing each EV point and EV charge point, how much does it cost? And you know, could you get into a bit more detail regarding it?
Yep. So we haven't spent any of the allocation. Eon Drive infrastructure have spent provided the capital investment for those charge points.
Thank you. Matthew, should we now move on to appendix? Oh, sorry, I missed. Oh, Councillor Morris, apologies about that.
You're not going to forget me, are you? You know how shy and retiring I am. I just wanted to try and understand going forward. We're all aware of the demise of Hertsmere and the fact that we won't, or unlikely to be around, unless we get another U-turn from central government, in 2 to 3 years' time. What I'm trying to understand is, are we winding down on all our capital investments or developments, or divesting ourselves of our assets? Because obviously, following on what from Paul was saying, it doesn't seem to be very clear on whether this is a bit of smoke and mirrors, or whether the reality is that we just haven't got any plans and don't intend to have any plans for future development. Thank you.
I'll pick that up. Look, there's a number of priorities that the administration are looking at, and I'm sure they will be brought forward in due course for approval. But as the capital programme, as I said, is a rolling programme, and additions can be made throughout the year. And as those priorities are developed, they will be brought forward and presented to Cabinet and Council.
Just to make one, it doesn't feel like we're winding down.
We now move on to C.
Moving on to Treasury, then Appendix C. So I think, as I mentioned in the revenue report, we're looking at quite a healthy return on our investment income, which is going to provide us a decent revenue surplus forecast for year end. The main reasons behind this are because generally investment rates have been higher and we've been getting better returns. So the UK base rate has reduced, but it's reduced at a much slower rate than had been anticipated, say, a year ago. And we've been benefiting from those higher rates. Also, as I just mentioned, in terms of the capital programme, we had quite a large slippage from the previous year. We're forecasting quite a large slippage again this year, which has meant we've got higher balances currently that we're investing. So all of that is actually generating additional returns. When we did set the budget, we also took into account that there is a borrowing need for us, and we factored in that there will be future borrowing costs that we would have to budget for. So we didn't want to set a budget that was going to then leave us a budget gap moving forward. So I think there was always, if you refer back to your budget papers, there was always an expectation that we would probably return more than the actual budgeted amount. But we knew that there would be future costs of borrowing potentially. So a good investment return at the moment. In terms of how much we've got invested, we've got a total investment of 76.5 million as at the end of Q1. And out of that, around 15 million is loan funding. We heard about the Inspire All loan earlier, and I actually looked up the balance outstanding during that discussion. They've got an annuity loan, which means they pay back the same amount every month. It's about 62,000 they pay us back. So as they pay it back over the term, the amount of interest and the amount of principal sort of switches over, just like a mortgage. So at the moment, they've got a balance of about 2.9 million left out of the original 5 million loan, but that balance is starting to reduce a lot quicker now because the interest is switching more over to principal, and it's due to actually be fully paid back by January 2030. So it's I think the contract expires in 2032, so it's nearly 2 years before the contract expires. So yeah, around 15 million in loan funding. We've got about 40 million invested with local authorities as at the 30th of June, and around 20 million in the money market funds, with the remainder about 3 million in our own bank business premium account. So keeping a relative amount of liquid funds, so we've got that ability to flex, but trying to look at longer term investments that are returning higher rates. I've already mentioned, obviously, as part of the revenue report, we've got a decent return for the year, forecast to be around 1.6 million favourable variance, which is then contributing to that overall positive variance on the revenue account. I think that's it on Treasury. Any questions?
Yeah, Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you. You won't be surprised at this one, Matthew. Table 2. Increase, decrease in the amount invested. Why are increases treated as negative items and decreases treated as positive items? Surely if you have more invested, you have a positive outcome.
I don't disagree with you, Councillor. I think it's the way it's been presented previously, and I think we show income, but as a negative.
You know my views on that.
I think, yeah, I think that has been shown incorrectly the wrong way. It should be probably the other way around. I will speak to the report writer and get that changed.
Then on the detail of it, I don't understand how the working capital loans have increased. When I read the paragraphs on the text, they don't appear to have. Could you please clarify that for me?
I think the capital loans have reduced slightly over the quarter because Inspire All have been repaying. So the capital loans include, at the moment, 2.8 million.
Working capital.
Oh, sorry, working capital. The working capital loans have gone up because we made a further advance to Elstree Studios, which I think is 750,000. So the HDL loan has stayed at $500,000. So we're looking at quarter-on-quarter movement. So the previous quarter, we had $500,000 with HDL and about 8 million with EFS, and then EFS have taken a further drawing against their facility of 750.
So there's no other questions on C. Shall we move to Appendix D?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so over the first quarter of the year, debt has generally been falling, which is the expected sort of pattern for the first quarter of the year. So generally in the final quarter of the previous year, we're seeing debt coming off because of the action that we're taking, and that sort of generally continues into the first quarter before we then start raising sort of summonses and liability orders for the New Year's debt. I think it's good to see that the total debt as at the end of quarter one is at more or less the same level as it was a year ago, bearing in mind that we've raised about 170 million of new debt since that time. So that's good to see, and I think that shows that recovery action, continued recovery action, is paying dividends. Generally, in terms of our council tax and our business rates, which make up the majority of our debt, we have a 2% provision for bad debt. That's built into the calculations we make for our council tax and for our business rates and our funding requirement. However, if you look back over the past few years, the level of debt that we've actually written off is less than 0.5%. So we generally always overachieve in terms of our 98% target. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily the case in terms of our in-year collection, which has not been meeting the target rate over the last couple of years. But we have made considerable moves forward in terms of collecting older debt, and actually had that older debt been applied to current year debt, we would have more than exceeded our target last year. But I think the other point to just make there is that we will only, the target, the collection rate may not actually be meeting its target, but we only report here what is actually debt. So whilst we might not be hitting our target collection rate, that might be because we've got payment plans in place with our households, with our ratepayers, that will take them beyond the end of the year. So that has an impact on our target rate, but it means that our collection eventually does meet that rate. I think generally we've seen a reduction in council tax. Business rates has been relatively stable, but do bear in mind that that includes collection and actually rebilling. So in some cases where we get a change of a ratepayer, we might have been billing the landlord, and actually they provide us details of the tenants. We then have to rebill and go through the process again. And we've got a couple of very large properties at the moment which have been put to the VOA to be split. I'm not going to talk about them in a public meeting, but happy to inform members afterwards. But we're talking significant rateable values of both of a couple of million, which we're not collecting anything on at the moment until the VOA have made that decision. So that is also impinging on our collection rates. I think that's probably it, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Do we have any? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you. Don't mean to embarrass you, Matthew, but chart 1, which appears after paragraph 111 and before 112, I showed this chart and the comment at 112 to my children, and they both agreed with me that the text in 112 is not replicated in the chart 1, because it says that the level of debt for this quarter is about the same as it was this time last year and higher than in 23-24. 23-24 is the turquoisey green line and is above the 24-25 figure excluding SIL. Including SIL, 23-24 was higher than it is at the end of the first quarter. So whether you're talking about excluding SIL or including SIL, that statement is not correct. And I just wondered whether there is some misunderstanding in what was expected there, because it's disguising the fact that the overall level of debt is actually rising year on year, and we are not reducing total overdue debts. They're going through a cycle and coming down at the end of the quarter, in the last quarter, but they're not coming down below where they were at the end of the quarter of the previous year.
Thank you, Councillor. I think if you look at the total overdue debt, including SIL, for 25/6 compared to 24/5, it is almost the same line. It is almost identical. But I take your point that the total overdue debt, including SIL, for 23/4 is actually higher. So we've actually reduced that overall debt. Looking at the line to. So, sorry, let me just check that wording. Yeah, it should say lower, not higher than 23/4. So we have actually reduced the debt from 23/4 as at that time. The curve for 23/4 was unusual though, because we were still seeing that impact from COVID and also from sort of the state of the economy at the time.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. In that case, we don't have any further appendix. No. Just checking. Is the committee happy to note the report and update? Thank you very much. Thank you, Matthew. We'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is the forward planning programme and committee work programme. It's for us to consider the attached forward planning programme and identify possible issues for scrutiny, to consider the attached committee work programme and requirements for officer and or portfolio holder attendance. And does anyone have any questions regarding that? No? In that case, committee happy to note that as well? Yes. Brilliant. Then agenda item 9, any other business that the chair considers urgent? There isn't any. Agenda item 10, dates of future meetings. The next meeting will be held here at 7 p.m. on Monday, the 10th of November. And I can close this meeting at 20:46. Thank you very much.